Dr. Augusto Zimmermann is a senior lecturer and director of postgraduate research at Murdoch University in Perth. He's also a commissioner with the Law Reform Commission of Western Australia, a vice president of the Australian Society of Legal Philosophy, president of the Western Australian Legal Theory Association, and he's an editor of the Western Australian Jurist Law Journal. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Augusto Zimmermann.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be present and with the opportunity to have a couple of things that I believe to be relevant for everyone here. So it's an honor, and I'm seeing a couple of friendly faces, which makes me more comfortable. Sometimes there are not so many friendly faces in academia when I have to deliver my addresses. So I feel a bit more relaxed. So it's an honor to be here. I think Professor Harrison referred to the fact that my area is domestic violence, and I will explain the context in which I got involved with this important subject. By the way, Professor Harrison's presentation was quite enlightening, and I have something to say about this. Our Law Journal accepted after of course, his paper was submitted to publication in my law journal. We sent to two international renowned academics, and the paper was accepted to publication in the Western Australian Jurist. So two of his papers on this subject are published in the Western Australian Jurist. And that is an important achievement, because we can prove now that we have at least one law journal in this country that is publishing articles regardless of ideological or any sort of other considerations. We are treating everyone fairly, and he published two papers that are quite important on that particular subject in our law journal. Before I go further, perhaps I should just say, guys, that explain the reason as to why I got involved with this issue of domestic violence. I'm not a family lawyer. Perhaps I should thank God for that, because it's such a tough area. And I actually would like to reform it. So I happen to be a fellow at the International Academy for Jurisprudence of the Family. And I feel that I should be more active there, because I want to reform the system. And I even contemplate the possibility of supporting the abolishment of the system, because it's absolutely evil. It's not serving us at all. But I came to the subject as a result of the fact that I'm also a law reform commissioner. I was appointed as a commissioner by the previous Attorney General. I think it was courageous of him to do so, because one of the questions I made him once he contacted me asking whether I would accept the job, I said, "Are you sure that you're appointing me? Because I will not compromise. I will tell the truth, and I will stand for the things I believe. And even if that can actually be not popular, or perhaps even be a frontal attack on the government." And that's what ultimately happened, because we got a series of inquiries conducted by us, and we even released a report on domestic violence restraining order. And that's when I got to know more about this subject, and I decided to write about this. So in 2013, the Commission published a discussion paper on the subject of family domestic violence and restraining orders. And what happened is that we released a final report in June 2014. And I thought everything would go very well, but the government didn't really follow our recommendations, even though there was an impression that they were doing so. And I do not like to be used for such a purpose. So I decided to expose the matter, going to the media. And I got a couple of articles on this, published in the Australian newspaper and other publications, including Quadrant. Of course, sometimes it's not very easy to have it done, because as Professor Harrison refers to, it seems that the debate has been controlled by radicals who are trying to impose their worldview. In many ways, I regard myself now as being a bit radical as well. And the reason as to why I'm radical is because it seems that these people have been so highly successful that they basically took over the institutions. And you're referring to Professor Harrison University. Well, there are far more females than the males now. And some of the policies really clearly seem to be directed against people like me, actually. But I'm not going to go further on that. But I just want to confirm what you're saying, that this is actually the experience that I have experienced. So just to let you know that what happened in regards to these domestic violence restraining orders report is that it was violated by the government of Western Australia. I would expect this easily coming from Labour, because Labour seems to be in the vanguard of the bad ideas in this country. But the Liberal Party seems to be following the trend and sometimes acting in a cowardly fashion. And I think that's because they feel that this is going to give them more votes, and I don't believe to be so. And perhaps that's a sign that we should be a bit more mobilized to let these politicians know that they cannot be destroying innocent people's lives with total impunity, because that's what's happening at the moment. And then I have been bombarded with many letters of people who have lost absolutely everything. And when I try to explain these politicians, some of them, really, they couldn't care less. They feel that I was a burden and an inconvenience. So just to explain, for just explaining that some people, perhaps for years without seeing their kids, some of them lost everything they had, even their dignity, even their properties, you name it. And I will give you some examples of even people who are members of the legal profession who now are living in their offices because they cannot go back home. They lost access to property as a result of false accusations of restraining orders based on false accusations. And of course, if it's not bad enough that interim orders might discard the need of evidence to be provided, now the brilliant idea of these politicians is that we should remove this need even at the point of the final hearing, so that you can be falsely accused and lose absolutely everything, all on the basis of false accusations. And the law now says so that we might even have to prevent domestic violence to happen by issuing a restraining order. So it's remarkable that even if domestic violence is not or has not even been committed, a person can actually face a restraining order in Western Australia. So one thing that I must say, and I'm denouncing here these authorities, and I mean the Parliament of Australia, the Commonwealth government, is that, first of all, I'm not saying that all politicians are bad, but human rights are very important and they need to be respected. We have a rule of law tradition, and these people seem to know very little about something called the Magna Carta. When I interacted with the Attorney General, I just tried to tell him about the history of the Magna Carta and the fact that we have in this country a tradition of due process of law and natural justice, so that nobody can actually be called an abuser without the matters being properly addressed, and the person have a right to have a proper defense. But it seems that these people have forgotten what the idea of rule of law actually means. And the whole idea means, for instance, that natural justice, rule of law, and equality before the law are sacrosanct principles of the common law system. And because I have been writing on different topics, sometimes I'm officially invited to attend hearings. For instance, last week I was attending one on religious freedom. I was providing oral witness. That's because I write on the subject. I also write on freedom of speech, as you might know. I have a book recently published called No Offense Intended, because I don't want to offend anybody. But if I offend, that's all right. But what I want to say is that we have a problem with free speech in this country. When you feel that you're living in Australia, we have democracy, but without free speech, how can you actually have a normal and civilized debate? And so I have been invited to attend 3 inquiries. And they have always invited me officially, because I write on this topic, I publish articles on this. But I also write articles on the topic of domestic violence and restraining orders. And I also conducted, together with my fellow commissioners, a whole inquiry on domestic violence and restraining orders. It's an official publication coming from the Western Australian government. Do you know what happened? They have never approached me, and I got to know just recently that the federal government Parliament is conducting an inquiry on family violence laws and how to improve the family law system. Well, I have been writing a lot on this subject, and I feel that as a law reform commissioner who has conducted an inquiry on this subject, I should certainly be invited. I was not invited because this is a biased process, it seems. I know that I get a lawsuit for saying so, but I was not invited, and my submission, they have never sent to me even an acknowledgement of receipt. So I sent my submission, but I have never heard of what happened. And because I'm very busy, this was probably like 2 months ago. So it seems that they do not want to listen opinions that are not directed in the favor of their outcomes. They have a bias and an outcome, because why not to call me if I was called to attend other hearings? If I have been attending parliamentary inquiries invited by them. But this one, they have never approached me to discuss this matter. And I'm now exposing this to everyone here. That's what's happening. Because I'm not afraid of them, and I think that we should be now bold and courageous, because the truth needs to be exposed. Because I have been... Yes, thank you. There are too many victims. You need to respect these people. And, I have now collected many letters of people whose lives have been utterly destroyed. And I really feel sorry for them. So just to give an example, 2 things have been a problem now. One is this expansion of the concept of domestic violence. So domestic violence does not necessarily mean what you would normally regard as being domestic violence. It could be all sorts of things. It could include verbal abuse or something like that, but it's also very difficult to prove certain things. For instance, when I was talking to one of these people, trying to expand the meaning of domestic violence, I tried to ask her what she meant by the concept of financial abuse or something like that, and she told me, oh, that's when your husband decides not to share your bank account with you. It's not, she's retaining the finances of the family, not allowing this person to spend the money. And what I was saying, that was my question. I said, well, perhaps there is a reason. Have you thought about this person being alcoholic or drug addict or prodigal? There are some reasons as to why you might not want to have a joint bank account. It's a very dangerous thing. Oh, verbal abuse. I was told that, including the federal guidelines, that if you threaten divorce, can be now also grounds for successful application of restraining order. So if, let's say that you're having a very terrible life with your wife or husband for that matter, and you're having such a difficult time with this person that you say, look, I don't think I can cope with this. I think I'll have to apply for a divorce. I'm sorry, but you're being too nasty to me, perhaps even violent. This person can actually use that as for the purposes of obtaining a restraining order. As I've seen examples of a person, for instance, who got a restraining order because the wife was upset with the fact that she was being asked about her extramarital affair. So this woman was arriving drunk, was betraying the husband, and terribly treating the children. She got the restraining order and evicted him from his property because he was bothering her. Yeah. And actually, the justice of the peace, this is even given by a more objectively speaking, a non-lawyer is a justice of the peace. And he gave her the chance of getting this for the kids as well, inducing her to obtain restraining orders even to the children. And so just want to say another thing, is that nobody is immune to this kind of problem, because even if you happen to be a person who knows the law, you might not be able to resist the charge that has been imposed upon you. For instance, like a common strategy, and I'm saying this because I know what's happening, and I can get even the confirmation of some family lawyers who are my friends. For instance, with regard Patrick Paxson, Professor Paxson, the leading family lawyer in this country, he tells me in an article that it takes in New South Wales an average time of 3 minutes to get a restraining order. That's the average time. So some of them might be given in about, 30 seconds? And so you can get a restraining order, and that means you destroy a person's life. Well, I'll give you some of these strategies that are currently in place under the instructions of terrible lawyers. Some lawyers should have to be held, should be held accountable for what they are doing. Give an example, for instance, of a common strategy is the one of a woman or a man, for that matter, planning in advance the strike. For instance, like, of course, child support payments proportional to time of visitation. Of course, that this is another further incentive for parental alienation. Restraining order suits this quite well, because if you got a restraining order, it will be very hard for you to have access to your kids, especially if the restraining order is served for the protection of the kids. So what happens here is that a person might be planning this attack for such a long period of time, and she can actually be gradually withdrawing the bank account. It's a common thing. I have seen this all the time. So the person, when he served the restraining order, probably like one day prior to receiving a restraining order, the wife comes to him and says, well, if you see only $100 in the bank account, please, my love, do not worry about that. I'm investing the money of the family, applying shares or something like that. So I'm helping you. And then the restraining order is issued. This person is now facing the fact that he is prevented from returning home. He's now alienated from the lives of the kids. And now he goes to the bank and finds out that there is zero in his bank account. Absolutely nothing. He's homeless already because, he can't go back home. Now he's penniless because he's zero. And probably he might face a huge debt if he was such a nice spouse, allowing the wife, for instance, to have a joint credit card account. The credit card will be exploded. So it's not the face that you do not face the challenge here of having no money. You're not just penniless. You have a huge debt of perhaps $40,000 or $50,000 because the bank account of this person was emptied, but the credit card was exploded. And then you have just to make it even worse, the whole matter is resolved. The restraining order is cancelled for lack of evidence, but you still have to face the court, the family court challenge. Meanwhile, you have to having minus X amount in your bank to pay in debts. You face child support payment. You certainly have, perhaps at the top of these, pay spousal maintenance, and your life is completely ruined. Perhaps you might have lost your job too, because you couldn't cope with all this attack. And I have seen that even after this person is treated as a criminal, and he faces, for instance, the fact that he has to go to the Department of Child Protection to be interviewed. And the Department of Child Protection is going to tell him, after an interview, release a document that's necessary to be attached to the relevant documents that will be analyzed by the magistrate court, that this person is entirely innocent. So let's say that the accusations are now proven to be false. They are going to call something like unsubstantiated, meaning that they are false, actually. And then what I have seen is that some magistrates, perhaps the vast majority, will acknowledge in their decisions that it's true that the accusations are unsubstantiated. You know, this person had his life completely ruined, but they'll keep full custody of the children with the false accuser. So it's the crime being rewarded. I think these kind of people are evil, and I think this law is despicable, and I find it amazing that we allow this to happen in this country. And, you know, I think our politicians have to face the music and to be approached in a perhaps more aggressive manner, if I can say, to tell them to stop with this, because I can see thousands and thousands of innocent people losing absolutely everything they had in their lives. They lose property, they lose access to the kids, all the money, job. I have the case of a person, I'll give an example, who happened to be even a lady. She was going back home, because this can be a double-edged sword. Certainly the feminists are behind this, I have no doubts, because I have read family law articles and books, very unpleasant reading, I must say. Not very good to read when, you know, if you're depressed already, because it's quite depressing reading. That they would say they are behind this thing. There's no doubt that the feminists are causing all this damage, the radical ones at least. I don't want to be generalizing, but you know, this is coming from them. There's no doubt about this. And so this woman, perhaps the husband was told, look, if you want to get child custody, oh, look, it's very hard. If you're a man, you'll be screwed. There's no other way. But perhaps you can try to reverse things a little bit. Try to turn this woman into a person who is abusing of your kids and abusing of you. So in New South Wales, I was told so. They call, I think, apprehended violence orders. It has a different name. In Western Australia, they call restraining order. But it's the same thing. He was told by this lawyer that if he wanted the custody of the kids, full custody, then perhaps the best approach would indeed turn his wife into a person who's committing some terrible thing. But there is something called verbal abuse. And verbal abuse is enough for you to get the restraining order. So what happened is that she was going back home. She was like, you know, a businesswoman, and with a beautiful house. And she was stopped to enter because the police officer was like preventing her from, you know, accessing the property. The kids were inside. And the police officers were mistreated by her, and she got crazy. She got very emotional, because she wanted to go and see the kids. And the police prevented her from going to the house. So what happened? The police witnessed in the favor of the other person, saying that, well, this is the evidence that she's emotionally unstable, that she's able to be verbally abusive and so forth. And then I'll just tell you what happened. This woman is now homeless. She lost her house. She couldn't cope with that. She can't see her kids. And she lost her job because she couldn't continue her job, because she lost her capacity to be working. So it was a businesswoman who now became homeless. And look, this is just to give an example that can happen even to a woman. But 90% of these cases, or even more, the men are the victims. So I have a whole collection of these cases. I mean, for instance, like a lawyer, as I mentioned recently, a couple of minutes ago, not recently, it's just a couple of minutes ago, that this is the partner at one of the biggest law firms in Western Australia. And now he lives in his office because his partner decided to obtain a restraining order. It is not very hard to get these days. And he lost the house that actually belonged to his family. So it's a property house that belonged to his parents. Now it's used by this person who falsely accused him of domestic violence. Not only that, but she brings the lover to stay in his house. And it's a very interesting thing when you have the lovers actually being told by the false accusers to call the children, to tell the children to call the lover father, and to put this guy as a replacement for the father who has been so miserably betrayed. I just can't understand these things are happening. I just can't understand how much of injustice is taking place. You cannot, look, I'll tell you one thing, like if this is the fact, and I have a collection of things, when I go with this pile of evidence of people who have been completely destroyed by the system, and if the politician is not caring about this, he's objectively evil, and he's an evil person, because it's not possible, you know. There's no excuse to be given. No excuse to be given. And I think this needs to be exposed. You can be either ignorant, but, you know, once you actually know what's happening, there is no excuse to be given. Look, sometimes I can get even emotional because it's really sad to see all these things. I think I should stop writing so much. I'm sorry about this issue because I have already made my statement. Because this is really so sad, you know. And how about the children? Like you have been alienated from the lives of the parents. And how about this thing? The person not only might have, as I said, stolen everything this person had, left him completely miserable. Now he or she, probably she, but could be he as well, is obtaining child support payments. And even if she decides not to have a job, even spousal maintenance, after inflicting all this pain and suffering. Well, we can understand now why the suicide rate is so high amongst males. It could happen with females, but I'm saying just it explains, it tells you why the suicide rate it's so considerable. And domestic violence, according to Professor Paxson, is not necessarily prevented via the use of restraining order. But if the other person got a restraining order destroying your life like this, I think it will trigger domestic violence. So what he says is that when you face a situation such as this, you who used to be such a peaceful person might actually lose your mind. And you can eventually become aggressive and do terrible things because you have basically nothing to lose. You have your life so undermined that you just lose your temper entirely. So he has proven in an article that one of the leading causes of domestic violence, real one, is actually false accusations of domestic violence and people obtaining restraining orders on false grounds. This is a leading cause of domestic violence in this country. And I think it's important to make this point. So it's something that we need to consider. Another thing is that I know that some of the academics, even in Western Australia, will be upset about what I have to say. But we have to review the child support payment scheme. Because it provides a further incentive for parental alienation, and it could always start via restraining orders based on false accusations, which are based on false accusations. Because that's when you can get the upper hand. If you want to get the upper hand, the lawyer will instruct you to make the false accusation. It's a common strategy. So make the false accusation, then you get the upper hand. When it comes to child support, and to control the property. Jenny Suck of Harvard University actually calls this de facto divorce. It's actually far more effective than a normal divorce if you really want to dispose or dump your spouse, because it's going to be a total separation whereby you cannot really have even a contact with your kid. If you dare to do so, you go to jail. So what you have is like people being sent to the prisons here just because they wanted to wish the children a happy birthday, just because they were missing them. Can you imagine you spend months without seeing your kid? It's his birthday. You make a phone call, you go to jail. And I don't like the approach of the police, because I was told by these victims that the police can behave in an appalling fashion. They approach this person as if he were a criminal. We are creating a criminal government which is supporting this kind of appalling behavior. And, you know, something needs to be done as a matter of urgency. I don't think I have anything further to say, apart 4 minutes left, so I just need to say regarding the link between child support payment and false accusations of domestic violence that, you know, if you're accused of domestic violence, you are prevented from having a meaningful relationship with your child. And it is also a powerful financial incentive on the part of those who make these accusations to prevent as much as possible the possibility of the other parent to have a relationship with your kid, and you are financially rewarded for this. But this is actually child abuse. So what I feel is that we should start to call these people child abusers, because that's what they are. And these children the custody should be given to those who have lost this access to the kids. We have to urgently require the reversal of this, so that everyone who is the victim of parental alienation will be rewarded with the full custody of the kids, and this other person will be severely punished, even with criminal charge. And thank you very much for your time to listen to my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dr. Zimmermann, thank you for speaking today. My name is Brett, I'm a fellow West Australian, and I can attest to pretty much everything you've talked about this afternoon. Thank you. I've actually got 2 important questions. However, I'll initially ask the first one. If we get time, hopefully there might be a chance for me to ask the other one a bit later when some of the other guests have had a chance to do so. Anyway, question number 1, perjury. Recently I've read various articles about the 2011 Gillard government's changes to the family law, titled the Family Law Legislation, Family Violence and Other Measures Act of 2011. The articles I've read were consistent with what Mr. Barry Williams' speech here on this stage yesterday, where he suggested, and I hope I'm paraphrasing this correctly if you're here, Barry. The 2011 changes to the legislation made it easier to commit perjury in the family court. Sadly, I've experienced false testimony in the family court, and I've received a hostile response when I challenged this false testimony. Professor Zimmermann, do you feel the current family court legislation does indeed condone false statements and perjury? Are examples of perjury in the family court punished? And what do you think is the best way to have these laws changed? Because I would like to have them changed.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I think one of the reasons as to why you face this challenge is because the whole idea of no fault has been completely corrupted. I think in the 1970s there was this concept that if the marriage is not working properly, we should just get a divorce, and matters of accountability wouldn't need to be provided. And that was actually very fair, because let's say that the marriage is not working. Both parties agree that, well, look, you know, I love you as a friend. I don't want to fight with you, but we do not even perhaps have children, and better, you know, to dissolve the marital relationship. And based on this, in the 70s, people came up with this idea of no fault. I think what this has become now is that accountability is not taken into account anymore. For instance, like, let's say that after all these processes of investigation, you find out that this spouse has miserably betrayed you. It's called misconduct. Why on earth you have a system of justice, a justice system, where the truth cannot be exposed and matters of accountability cannot be taken into account? We should call this a court of injustice, not a court of justice, because it is appalling. I think this kind of misconduct should be taken into account. For instance, a person who is miserably betraying the other partner should face contractual consequences. Let's say, like, if I am in a contract with another person that's of a business nature, if I misbehave, I have to pay a penalty. You know, there is a clause over there in the contract that forces me to pay a penalty. How is that marriage is the only contract that you can actually do whatever you want, destroy another person's life, and there is no accountability? Well, this is appalling. It's a court of injustice. So I think that these matters of misconduct should be taken into account. I think a person who displays such a disregard for the well-being of the kids should lose the custody of the kids and be given to the person who has been falsely accused. And even when it comes to property settlement, misconduct should be taken into account. It's time to promote here, and I'm openly declaring a revolution to repeal this terrible Family Law Act and start everything from scratch. Thank you.
Hi, how you going?
Hi.
There's another thing about the family court about prenups. Now, when you get married and you sign a prenup, and then you get divorced and you give their prenup to the family courts, some of the family courts won't accept it. Some women will just say, oh, I was pressured to sign it or something. So how would you confront that problem if you were trying to protect your assets and your house?
I think if I were, first of all, I think I really trust Adriana because I'm going to marry her in August. It's an act of bravery, but I trust her very much, you know, on both sides. On both sides. And I think that if the advice that I would give to my child is to actually, that's coming from a family lawyer, a friend of mine, that if it's your money from your family, you should rent the property to your children, and they would pay rent to you. But if you just give the property, but it keeps being in your name, I was told the family courts are actually dividing the property that belongs to the father, the parents of one of the spouses. I mean, it doesn't really work out very properly, which is quite unbelievable. So the best way is really to rent the property to your child, and that's it. Because, of course, then you might in the future give him some kind of gift in terms of, you know. I'm telling this because, look, this is what a family lawyer told me to do. I mean, what I'm saying is that nobody's secure. That's the main issue. Like, I think this is an attempt to destroy the family. I think there's no doubt about this. I mean, there is the homosexual lobby wanting, marriage and things like that. I just wonder how they have such a courage, But anyway, and certainly, like, it's not it's like you have to plot a scheme to protect your property. That's a very bad way to start a relationship like this. And I think this is really the case now. I think it's this kind of reality is actually making people think twice or thrice about getting married. Some of my students tell me that they're never going to marry. And so it's very hard for a woman to get to know a man willing to marry her. I think some of my students tell me that they will never marry because they had a terrible, they saw their parents facing those problems. And another day I was in the corridor of the law school, and one of my female students came to me and said, I just love what you do, it's really good. And I thought she was talking about free speech or rule of law, because these are my areas. And then she told me, I like your papers where you attack the feminists. And I said, oh, that's really good. And I went to have a coffee with her. And now she's the vice president of my association, the Western Australia Legal Theory Association. And then she thought about her life, about what happened. I'm not going to give you details because now I more or less told who the person is. But what's happening is that if you are a daughter who really loves your father and saw what your mother did to your father, the last thing you want to be is a feminist, I must say. So some of you who are ladies here probably had this experience of having your loved ones becoming the victims of this absolutely dreadful ideology. And that's why you cease immediately to have any illusions about feminism. Because you know what happened with the people who you love the most.
I think we've got time for one more question, perhaps from the other side, if there's someone over there. Anyone? Or maybe this side.
Thanks, Augusto. My name's Gerard. I've been through the system myself, and I had a win years ago, but experienced some terrible stuff. I guess my question is, what can we realistically do under the law? We've heard here today various statements made that supposedly politicians and so on have made that are blatantly discriminatory. I know on the 1 and 3 website they list a lot of false claims and stats from various people, the ABC and other people. How can we get this stuff out there that these people are making, the politicians, the judges and the lawyers are making and doing these making these illegal statements? And I know it's a difficult, we could potentially be sued, but that stuff needs to get out there and be exposed and as a way of helping to change things. And I'm just wondering how to, what can we do as people to expose this stuff and really just drive it home and prosecute some people?
I think it's an excellent point. I think, first of all, we have to tell the stories. I mean, in many ways, we live in a postmodern world. So people are very keen on listening to stories. And even if you have the statistics and you can talk about, what's actually taking place on a more objective level, as an academic, I always like to bring these stories. I always come to my students and say, like, I'll tell you what happened with this person. And then I can bring people into tears as a result. And they actually got to know that I'll talk about real people. I'll talk about real stories. I think that's the best way to go, is to be able to present your case in a good way. The feminists are very good on using catch phrases and slogans and things like that. Some of them can be quite appealing. One thing that I find it quite interesting is that why is that these people having so many terrible ideas? How is that they can be so influential and so powerful? I think that's probably because they know one thing perhaps better than us, is that they know the power of language. So I think what we need to do is to actually master this and to be able to touch people's hearts and not just their minds, but we need to actually be more able to present the stories and tell what happened to real people in real life scenarios. And certainly as a result of that, ask what then the government is going to do about what has happened, and what the government how the government feels about having been used, deliberately used, for the purposes of generating gross instances of injustice. And when I was interviewed by 2GB, I made this joke that I made a couple of minutes ago, saying that we should rename the family court to be a divorce court and a court of injustice, because that's not. It's an offense to me to call that thing a family court. It's in the business of destroying the families in Australia. Okay.
Augusto, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Augusto Zimmermann.
Thank you very much. Thank you.